things I want to do for you now is I want you to determine the world's view of the possibilities. And that doesn't mean you have to do what I do, but you definitely know about it. Okay? I take a couple of mallets. Once again, for those of you who might not have seen it before. Most natural thing in the world for most instruments is a trill. For us, it's a little bit difficult to do with one hand. And as I said before, the idea is to start to play diatonic fractions and arpeggiations with one hand. Not as the two inner mallets, right? But rather one hand alone, which enables you to create a different persona with the left hand, which is basically what most of keyboard literature is about for the past few hundred years. As I mentioned before, you can start out with small pieces. So you start out with smaller pieces, children's pieces, just like anybody, because even if you're 24 years old, if you don't have that deep musical background to be able to learn how voices are supposed to be put together, volume, phrasing, tempo, that whole thing, then you need to start at the beginning. And it's no shame, right? The shame, in my opinion, is when you start to play a really super wild Japanese 12-tone piece of music without having the basics of music really, without having already internalized them. Some things you can only learn by experience. Okay, I will tell you, how many octaves do we have here? 5. If I say 5-octave keyboard, what should be the first instrument that comes to your mind besides the marimba? Harpsichord. Harpsichord has 5 octaves. Scarlatti wrote something like 600 sonatas for the harpsichord. Many of them are playable on this instrument. Okay? I'm not going to say that you should go through the very highly technical ones. Those are very difficult. Okay? But the very melodic ones that are slow, the andante and cantables. Now Bach himself, of course, didn't only write from the Anna Magdalena notebook, he wrote also from the two-part inventions. 13 number 4. Number 8. Magdalena book. The Prelude in C major, also known as the Ave Maria. Then from the little preludes, the well-tempered clavier. It's so great. Open your minds to the idea that Bach already wrote the music that you need and you don't have to change it. It's already there. It's waiting for you and it's right. If you're going to come after the Baroque period, right, getting into the early classical, then things start to get a little bit dangerous. Here I say Haydn doesn't really work. I'm sorry, I don't know why. I can't find anything from Haydn that really works on this instrument. Mozart is wonderful. Because, actually, it sounds a little strange, it's famous, it's accessible, and you have to play the right notes. If you're going to take little pieces that don't need much changing, for instance, the Sonata in A major, Kirchelverzeichnis 311. variation group that comes after that. I wouldn't suggest the variation until you're really serious. As I pointed out last night, the final movement of the same song. Now there's a middle section there you just cannot play with the left hand accompaniment. So what I do is I just leave the left hand out and I play. That's. I just play it up an octave the second time. It makes it a little bit more interesting because it's a. Whatever it is. Now, you don't really need that bass note, bass line. Remember too, this is an important thing, that when you play this instrument, you have only one thing, but I mean, not only one thing, but you have one major unnatural characteristic, and that is because the notes of the bass are longer and louder than the notes of the right hand, when you play any piece where you need to balance the voices, you have to be very careful that the left hand doesn't dominate. Because if you come up later, right, the middle of the 19th century, forget it. It's just too hard. Okay? There are little pieces that you can do. You know, a little bit of Chopin, or, you know, whatever. Little pieces are okay. That's from the preludes. When you come into the 20th century, it gets easier again. The thing is, I mean, he's really outside the mainstream. You can get something like beautiful, simple. And that means that if you can't articulate the note itself, you just assume that the overtones are going to be reading through that anyway. It's not, but you're going to have to resolve that, right? There is a problem that I have at the end of the Beethoven Moonlight Sonata where it's whatever, it's something like that. If you play it as a block chord, it just doesn't sit right. But if you roll it, it's also bad. You know? In this piece that I played last night. What is that? Albanese. Okay? Now if I play this piece, Albanese wrote the second phrase. Now that to me is clearly guitar music. Absolutely clearly. So if I'm going to play it, and I know that it's a guitar piece, then I go. In other words, I'm not going to play this block octave. Okay? And you have to understand that if you look at a piece of music, find out what its heart is really all about. And if Albanese, which in this case took the national music of Spain, filtered it and put it into his hands, that's where if you look at wood and you think brown, then you get one color. But if you look at a voice, and a second voice, third voice, fourth voice, you don't want to say, oh, these are all black. No, it is as if you were a director of a film piece, okay? And this first voice is a character. It's going to enter into a dialogue with the second character. Then there's a third character, which is called the bass, and then four is the counterpoint or whatever. And each of these people are going to look different on stage. They're going to have different dress. They're not going to be dressed in the same costume. They're not going to say the same thing right after each other. There's going to be a dialogue. The theater director are going to orchestrate your piece to it. And just as no two people have the same feelings, no four people are going to have the same feelings. So anytime you use these four mallets, every one of them should be like a character in a play. A string quartet, think of that. Think of it that way. Okay, now I might play that. Of course, that's a four-voice texture, right? Everybody knows that. That is composer Mozart. This is the most famous classical piece in the world, folks. Sorry to tell you, we got to know. Eine kleine Nachmusik, first movement. Okay? Kirchhoff-Verzeichnis 525. Okay? The first time I might play it like this, and both voices are going to be balanced. Right? The upper voice is a little bit sweeter harmonically. words, I changed the position of my hands so that the lower voice became more overtoned.